think we can begin it actually. It's 2:02 now. So thank you for joining us for the third webinar on the series of Navigating COVID-19, Managing Your Workforce Remotely. My name is Kenny Leon with the Canadian Construction Association. Before we begin, a few webinar etiquettes. We just ask all participants to mute your audio. Of course, for questions, you can ask them throughout the presentation. You can use the question box in your screens for the questions. We will answer them at the end of the presentation. But of course, you have the liberty to ask the question right throughout the presentation itself. As you may or may not know, Canadian Construction Association have been hosting a series of these webinars on navigating COVID-19 under various topics in the best interest of our community and our members. Today's topic is of interest as we get accustomed to the new work norm from working from home, and of course with which comes the challenge of managing teams remotely. So we have a great panel today to address the working at home, managing teams remotely, and of course to answer your other concerns regarding this. Sincere thanks to KPMG Canada for presenting this webinar. On the webinar today, we are delighted to have as our panelists Augusto Patmore, Partner Advisory, Global Infrastructure, KPMG in Canada; Jennifer McCarthy, Senior Manager, Advisory, People and Change, KPMG in Canada; and Jenna Kirk, Senior Manager, Business Law, KPMG in Canada. Over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Kenny. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me. I am assuming that I'm okay to proceed, so.
You're good.
Okay, thank you. All right, good afternoon and welcome everyone. We're excited to be sharing what we've put into practice ourselves at KPMG to be effective when not at the physical office location. We believe these guidelines can help you too, as we are all adjusting to this new life normal of working from home. Managing your people and them feeling connected through effective communication is the goal for everyone. As Kenny kindly introduced us, I'll just say a couple more words here. And my name is Jennifer McCarthy. I am a people and change leader at KPMG based out of Calgary. For over 12 years, my focus has been helping people successfully move through disruption and technology-enabled change. I have two colleagues with me today, Jenna and Augusto, and I'll just ask them to please introduce themselves.
Hi, it's Augusto here. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, I should say. I'm delighted to be here sharing the panel. My background is I spent 17 years in the construction industry with company Ferrovio. Some of you will know that company, and subsequently with a smaller tunneling contractor in their business, running their global business for another 5 years. And then after that, I joined KPMG in 2013, where I'm the leader of the capital projects practice in the GTA. I'm a civil engineer by background, and we help our clients resolve any disputes, any claims, plan forward with their budgets and their schedules and their cost management on major capital projects. Thanks very much for your attendance.
And I'm Jenna Kirk. I am a lawyer within the Calgary office. I practice primarily in employment and immigration law. I have worked in-house for an oil and gas company, and I have also worked at a medium-sized firm, and now obviously I'm with KPMG. And I assist employers in Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC, and I'm also called in the Northwest Territories and the Yukon. So I help them with their employment and immigration issues. So I'll pass it back to you, Jen, to get us started.
All right, thanks guys. Okay, our agenda for today, the maintaining of culture within remote working routines. So we're gonna do a bit of context setting in a couple of minutes before we dive right into that. We're gonna share with you also some strategies and practicalities to boost morale in this time. We're going to be focusing on mental health and well-being to ensure that we're maintaining strong connections, fitness where possible, and the prevention of isolation, anxiety. We're going to talk a bit about some digital tools that maybe you're already using, or maybe some ideas for you to use. And we're going to talk about cyber, and this being a time where we need to be even more diligent to protect ourselves. Okay, so some context. Here we are, the novel coronavirus, known as COVID-19, has hit us, leading everyone to react to maintaining operations while keeping the workforce connected. This is an unprecedented time, and it's a circumstance that's forced us as a workforce to go remote. We need to be creative in where and how we work. For some employees, the creativity and collaboration tools that are in the workplace are limited. So we're going to share with you some ideas and hopefully some guidance and practice for you to leverage here. And we do recognize that this whole experience is overwhelming, but we can hopefully take some comfort in knowing that we're all in this together, and we can work together here and hopefully sharing with you some insights. And thinking about the construction industry here and how this applies to you, we understand and totally recognize that in the construction industry, this is different, where remote work is not fully possible in this environment. That if the field workers are not on site, a lot of your operation will slow down. But the reason for this webinar is to offer some ideas that we typically offer our clients who have office staff, and hopefully you can see where you can apply this to you as well. So we hope you find this session useful. Another point just to make here is that we recognize that the communication that maybe currently you're facing in your various situations, because you may be in various places within Canada, that there might be a combination of people still in the field doing some essential work, the non-essential work may be on hold, and that there's a real potential challenge of wanting to maintain and needing to maintain that contact throughout this time. So we certainly invite you to think about those situations that you're facing, and hopefully we'll be addressing this along the way in the webinar. However, we do invite you to, as Kenny was saying, to use the chat to ask questions, and we will address those. All right. So we always thought that advancements in new or more technology would likely be driven by leaders in the business. But today that is not the case. COVID-19 has literally shoved us into working from home. So we are now working remotely. Business continuity plans likely did not account for the vast majority of people to be working from home. That's a reality. And even in situations where employees maybe were working partially at home, a lot of organizations were just not simply prepared to be working remotely. And some interesting stats here. Before COVID-19, only 3.4% of the North American population was working from home. And if you look just immediately below here, whereas now 88% of businesses are in a remote work environment. That is a huge jump in such, like in literally weeks for us. And 44% of employers did not even offer remote options. We see that 67% of businesses have made investments now in that time for the remote work and telecommuting tools. And this is a huge number. 5 million students in Canada impacted by the school closure. And this is the first time in world history that schools are closed in 185 countries. So I think a lot of people are well aware of that fact of having your children at home in this time as well. 77% of consumers are open to using telehealth, but only 19% with access. So this is a big shift to be moving to the remote work world. Here, this is some practical advice now we're going to step into in terms of maintaining your culture with the remote work routine. We have some practical advice here about setting up your workspace, best practices and well-being, leading your team, and leading meetings. So we're going to dive right into that. So setting up your workspace. In an ideal situation, you set up a dedicated workspace in your home. This will allow you to best focus. But in all reality, you are also dealing with what could be numerous people, varying noise levels, and physical space limitations. But when you can, we want you to try and consider these guidelines. The ergonomic setup. As we know, if you're sitting at a desk for a long period of time, you're going to be most comfortable when you have proper situation of your desk and chair and keyboard. For good computer hygiene, we know that just keeping your computer shut down on a daily basis will help. And the obvious, maybe to some, maybe not to everyone, but wiping down your computer keyboard and your mouse. We're being told relentlessly to wash our hands, which I'm sure all of us are doing. But all these surfaces that we commonly touch also need to be cleaned. So this is important to do as well.
And Jen, I'd also throw in that you would want to actually wipe down your cell phone, because we use our cell phones so much, and that is one of the things that touches every single surface. And then we just put it right back beside our faces.
Oh my gosh, yes. The cell phone, your iPad, everything, all these devices that we have. Absolutely. The safety considerations, this is really about, we're at home, we have our computer equipment out. We may not have a dedicated office or desk space. You might be sitting in the kitchen, in the basement, but it's just obviously moving your equipment out of the way so that, when accidents happen, hopefully your equipment has been saved. And then remote access to your company resources. This is something that, for a lot of organizations now, we're working remote, and what are the common ways that we need to actually connect back to the operational office? So if we have a question about IT, if there's some software you need, or if you have an HR question, how do you reach back to the company? Maybe you already have those phone numbers and email addresses and they're all widely communicated, but this is something to be mindful of if you are managing teams, and just make sure everyone is well aware of how to get access to that. Okay, so we have a link we're going to be providing to you as part of the content if you're interested at the end of this session. There's a brief video from the World Economic Forum, and there's 10 tips here that they share about working from home, and what are the common activities you should be doing on a daily basis to be most effective. So the first one, and the one just immediately to the left, number 10, I think actually links. So when you wake up at your normal time and do your normal routine, this is so important. We can get into the habit of just being at home and, being more comfortable and like not having to rush off and get into the office. But now where we are home, is actually even more important to be diligent about having your routine, because it will make you feel more productive. It will make you feel more effective in your role. the time you usually spend on a commute, if you obviously are not having to commute now, what you can be doing, obviously with that time if you're not choosing to sleep more, but is to take care of yourself and do a bit more reading perhaps that you could take advantage of now that maybe you couldn't if you were driving. These, I'll just go back around to number 2 with the virtual coffee breaks with colleagues. I can't speak to that enough of how important that is and what you can get out of sitting on if you have the technology with something like Skype or Teams and you can see one another, even a FaceTime, to do a coffee break with someone and catch up. The video connection goes so much further. I mean, talking on the phone is great as well, but now that we're so much more distanced, being able to see someone can make such a big difference. Number 3 was separate your space to work from your space to relax. This is, you know, back to this may or may not be possible given how much physical space you have in your house, but it is good to at least put away your laptop when you're done for the day, just so that you can not have to even look at it if you're in the same room, just somewhere where you can actually decompress and move on to taking care of yourself and your family. To take enough breaks. Sometimes it's just good to schedule those in if you have to, if you have a busy calendar, but make sure that you plan out a couple of breaks a day. And even if you can step outside and take a quick walk around the block to get some fresh air will make a huge difference. Which links to number 5. So where you can incorporate a bit of exercise, that mental stimulation, that always helps create a positive attitude. And number 6, with keep talking to people, it's so important that we're not, you know, it can feel also at times that we are spending a lot of time on the phone because that is the main way to connect with people. But it is important to keep, if you don't have a lot of people around you in your home, but it is important to be doing that so that we're sharing what's concern and on the mind, so that we're not feeling isolated about everything that's changing so rapidly. With number 7, have a comfortable chair, table, and quiet space. Echoes what was said earlier about having some dedicated space where you can. And, you know, just the whole like getting out of your pajamas is so important. To have a shower in the morning, make your bed, have some self-care, put on your moisturizer, put on your makeup. I find that makes a huge difference for me. I'm currently wearing my jeans and sweater, and but it's so important just to get out of your sleep clothes. And those working hours are important too. This is going to come up in some slides to come about having an agreement within your team, within your boss about the working hours, because those may have changed slightly now that you're home. It doesn't have to be necessarily the exact hours. There might be some unique situations where that would adjust. So it's just to keep that in mind. So hopefully these are resonating. I'm going to keep moving. About now maintaining these good remote routines and considering all the people that we need to be mindful of when we're working and when we're trying to get through this overall situation. We have our own boss, we have colleagues, staff, your families, yourself. There's so many people to connect with and make sure we're aligned. Make sure we're have the same understanding. And this set expectation piece is important when this is back to you about the working hours. If you were typically showing up for an 8 to 5 work day, that could still be the expectation. But if it's not, then there should be conversation and clear communication with everyone about what's adjusting and why, so that people can, you know, plan around their lives accordingly. How to escalate. If you can't get a hold of your boss, if you can't get a hold of a colleague, what do you do? How do you get in touch with them? These are simple things, but it's really important just as a team and as a group to make sure everyone's clear about how to do that. With communication, we've touched on that a bit already, but a lot of people are still using their cell phones for texting, for calling one another, for connecting even to work calls. It's important to make sure that all of these options are being used. And we also think about the other options or ways that we do communicate that could be less collaborative. So even though email is a mainstay and we use that a lot, if you're only using email, it can really be a way, or you have some risk, I think, of becoming self-isolated when you're just sending emails or you're just reading emails and you're not really using the different varieties of communication to stay in touch with your team, with your colleagues. So these varieties of, the using a tool such as Skype where you have video, texting, group chats that are more fluid and more dynamic can be more effective to just make sure everyone is feeling connected. Being flexible and patient, this is, now that we're at home, there's quite likely going to be some new personal needs that surface and need to be considered and understood with your boss. Maybe there's certain hours because your children are home that you need to focus on their at-home schooling or them getting connected online. So have the open conversation with whomever you need to within your workplace to make sure your situation is known, because there's going to be a lot of variety and variation to now how people have to manage their workday. And it's okay. We're all adjusting. The best thing to do is just have the ability to open up and talk to your boss about it so that there's trust, so that if now you're not going to be available until midday or mid-morning, whatever it might be, it's just understood so people's expectations can be better set. I'm just going to pause there for a moment and just call out to Jenna to see if there's, I know you had some items that you were going to bring up here.
Sure. I totally agree with your comments too with regards to using Skype and video chat. I'm a person who does not like the phone in a general sense, and I initially hated the idea of having to have video chats on a weekly basis with my teammates, but it's actually been quite wonderful, like being isolated and, being at your home, not seeing anybody or hearing voices and things like that. Like, it's tough for a lot of people. So, we've definitely had the thing where my dog was being annoying and jumped on in front of the camera, and then everybody else was like, oh, like, here's my dog, and my boss didn't have a dog, so we went and got one of his kids' stuffies so he had a pet and he didn't feel left out. So it really is like, it's a funny situation that we're all thrown in. It's a great opportunity to actually do team building. You get to learn a little bit more about the people that you work with in a setting that you don't normally see them in, and it actually is quite wonderful in a lot of situations. One of the things that employers need to be aware of, though, is that they still need to provide structure during this time, and that is one of the most important things that we're all lacking right now, is that structure in our day, that getting up in the morning and getting dressed and going off to work and putting in our work day and coming home. We don't really have that anymore. It seems our days kind of meld into our nights, meld into the next day, and half the time I'm like, what day of the week are we currently even at? So making sure that you have policies in place, guidelines for your employees so they know what they should be doing when their core hours are. Like Jen said, you may have situations where you're going to have to modify those for individual needs, but having something where people know what they're expected to do and having that in a policy is really important, because you still need to be able to performance manage these people. And with that, having performance management documentation in place so that you can go over it with them, and they do have, you know, something that they can review and improve on if they need to. Those are all great things to just give employees back stability and give them a way to kind of move forward and get used to this whole situation. To the extent you need any assistance with preparing those materials, Jen and I are both very happy to do so.
Awesome, thank you, Jenna. Okay, I'm just going to close out this slide with a couple more comments, and then we'll move on to working from home with kids. But we'll just pause a moment here on the maintaining mental health and well-being. Just a few more bits to say here around the mental health piece, and there being some boundaries. And back to structure that Jenna was saying, the structure is going to help us to have some boundaries, and whether that's a signal with your workspace, if you have a dedicated workspace, or wherever you choose to have your workspace, it is a signal of that being you're in work mode now. But also the schedule, so having the agreement with your boss, with your team, of whatever the schedule is going to be, that is established. Once that's set up and everyone is aware of what the situation is, what the schedule is, people usually just want to know and are good to proceed or follow once it's been established. And we're going to talk a bit about this further in, but about taking a break from the news. This is so much information coming to us on an hourly basis, and it can be overwhelming. It's critical to stay informed, but the constant stream can be detrimental to our health. So we actually recommend you don't take in a lot of information more than 2 times a day, because there's so much changing. We're curious. Some people may choose not to watch the news on some days, but when we're constantly watching it, it can add to the feeling of being overwhelmed. But so we just want to encourage you to just keep a check on that for yourself and for your people in your household, that you are limiting that. And then learning to work from home with kids. I'm just going to move on to this next slide. So this is, you know, on some of the earlier stats was being talked about with the 5 million school children being affected by the situation with COVID-19. So it's not surprising that there's a lot of challenge that many people are facing with having to homeschool potentially, or support your child's new online school routine and having them physically there with you. So we want to address some of the guidance here of what you could be doing, hopefully to have some support and structure there. So I'm going to invite Jenna and Augusto, if you wanted to talk a bit about here, or talk about any examples that you might want to share.
I don't know if Augusto wants to jump in. I'm happy to share the struggles of working from home with kids for sure.
Go ahead, yeah.
I mean, I've been on Skype video calls, and my 5-year-old thinks that it's extremely funny right now to scare people. So she decided that she was going to sneak into my bedroom behind me, because she's learned how to pick the lock, and and sneak up and yell boo in the middle of a presentation to clients. To which they all, of course, laughed. I mean, we're all in this together. We all get it. Had that happened in a normal situation, I might have gotten a different reaction. But everybody is going through this. I've talked to so many people. And I even posted on LinkedIn the other day that, you know, we're not working from home. We're all at home during a crisis trying to work. And there's a big difference there. We didn't all sign on to homeschool our kids. That's another joy that I've learned. I have an 11-year-old, and part of her homeschooling requires that 2 to 3 hours a day I go over materials with her and correct her work and explain to her what she's done wrong. which I don't know if any of you guys have an 11-year-old daughter, but that is never a fun conversation to have. So there's lots of situations where you're trying to balance it and you feel the guilt of, you know, your kids outside your door and wanting to come in and see you because you're home all of a sudden, and not being able to interact with them and spend as much time as you'd like to with them because you know you have to work. And just remembering that they feel the stress of all of this too. You know, I took my kids up to the free space above my house. We have a big field above my house. And just so they could get out there and run around and yell out their emotions and yell out what they're feeling. And, you know, my 11-year-old yelled out, "This sucks. This isn't fair that I can't see my friends." And I yelled out, "This sucks too," because it sucks that I can't see the people that I work with that are my friends. And, you know, just remembering that the kids are going through a lot too. We're going through a lot. So just being kind to yourself and understanding that, you know, maybe you didn't get as much accomplished today as you normally would have if this was a normal situation, but this isn't. And so just remembering that it's okay, and you can have those moments where you yell out, "This sucks," and you just take a moment for yourself. But we are all in this together. And so to the extent that, you know, you need help with anything, reach out to those people, reach out to us. You have our contact information. We can help you with any work-related type items, but don't forget that you, just because you don't see them every day, it doesn't mean that the people that you normally reach out to aren't there and wouldn't be there for you. So
I'll just add one quick, mindful of time, one quick observation or thought on my end. I have older kids, ages 15 and upwards. They're all here at home. I've introduced my kids to many of my colleagues at work. They're joining in some calls and making fun of me when I'm, you know, searching the internet as opposed to working on my reports. Or, I mean, we're all here. It's not a big space, and might as well take it naturally and just present life as it is. We have a saying in KPMG that we are proud of, which is that we bring our whole selves to work. And because this crisis is forcing us all to think outside of the box, let's really do that. There's nothing wrong with it. And it's actually very positive and a healthy thing to do. And it's been fun.
Thanks to you both. I'm just going to say one final comment and then we'll move on. Within KPMG, it's been recognized within our staff that people are struggling with the ability to balance all of work and having children at home. And there was a support group that's been set up internally. So I don't know if that is something in your organizations that could help potentially if you're hearing from some of your staff about this, or if you're hearing from them, period. But sometimes just having a network of people who are also having common problems is helpful to know that you can call upon. And I believe there was another related webinar done by KPMG as of yesterday that focused entirely on this topic. So we can certainly look into providing some more information on this if you are interested. Okay, thank you. Just on collaboration and helping your teams improve. So just a few more stats, and then we're going to move on into leading a team. But this is echoing what we were saying earlier about feeling more connected when you can see people. So 87% of people feeling more connected. Just being mindful of what we're going to talk about a bit on cyber, but when we're in these online meetings, obviously we're talking about all kinds of things business related, but it's just making sure we're all on secure networks, or what we think is secure networks, working from home on our own Wi-Fi. But just obviously be mindful if you are outside having a conversation. And that it's just an interesting statistic to know that when joining meetings, there's a lot of people using their mobile phones. It's not just laptops to connect. And this maybe in the construction industry is common if you've got some field workers who are joining potentially some meetings. Okay, leading a team. Going to go over a few points here, not all, but just to reinforce, as maybe people on the phone watching this webinar who are team leaders, some important reminders about making sure your team knows how to reach you and that you're available as needed. Have you published your cell number, your email? Hopefully that's all well understood. I'm going to talk about two other things along the top here about the buddy system. Activate the buddy system. You may have what you feel like a good team, that people seem to be doing okay. They're working fine, no issues. We implemented this recently in our team about the buddy system, and what we did was we actually wrote out a list of names and gave people an assignment of who they were to be checking in on. So this is a new world we're in, where yes, we're having maybe some regular contact through team calls, but really what's going on. So it's meant to be a one-on-one check-in. So I'm just sharing this because it is a great way to make sure individuals are doing okay. So you can assign Joe to connect to Sue and Sue to connect to Mike and Mike to connect to Bob, that kind of thing, so that, even if these people may not have close relationships, it is just staying accountable and making sure that there could be something going on that people just aren't verbalizing yet or talking about. It's a good way to just make sure people have a connection. And the other point I was going to make here about clarifying team member responsibilities. Out here in Western Canada, we do work with some construction companies, and I heard an anecdote from a colleague who's working with a construction client. So one thing that she told me was that now that people aren't physically seeing one another in the office, there was actually some of the work was not getting done now that we're working from home remotely. And it was simply because what used to happen was that the supervisor would see the individuals that reported in, and they would have a conversation at the start of the day, and it would be clear what was expected. And so that supervisor, maybe those tasks didn't change significantly from day to day, but they would always have a check-in. And now here working from home, some of these things started to slide. So it was just, it's about a reminder to the supervisor, whatever, some people do need to have that just quick phone call to make sure that it's clear to them what they're doing. However it is to communicate, text with them, whatever. It's if you assume that everyone knows what they're meant to be doing and it's not clearly said or reminded about, it can so certainly fall off. So just wanted to share that. Okay. These are a few tips I'm going to touch on here with leading virtual meetings and what you can be doing before, during, and after. So to where you can in our environment here, just to choose the right space. I personally have been on calls where I have moved 3 times. So I have someone here that lives with me, and that individual is often on calls throughout the day too, and is loud. So I have to get up, go into a different room, shut the door. So recognize that sometimes your choice may not be the right one, but where you can, try and pick a spot where you think you won't be interrupted. Sometimes Plan B does kick into action, which is, similar to what I was just saying. I have to go to a different space. And obviously, if you're going to be on an important call, you want to make sure you've got a couple of backup plans. During the call, it is hopefully part of what you're doing already, but I find a lot of times when we first get on calls, we do actually take a moment before diving in to check in and ask everyone how they're doing. What did you have for dinner last night? what you're watching on Netflix, what's who are you talking to lately in your life. It is important to do that, and especially in these times, just to make sure everyone, you know, has a moment. And people are commenting and saying that they feel more connected than ever to some of their team members, because we never were really forced to, you know, sit down and and it's just a different way of looking at one another if you're doing the video conference. There's definitely some good value and good outcomes from this. And I think after is pretty straightforward. We want to make sure that everyone understood what was the main objective, follow-up actions. It's again a way to just communicate and make sure it's clear to everyone. And we're going to move in now to strategies to boost morale. And I'm going to turn this over now to Jenna and Augusto.
Jenna, feel free to go first.
Sure. So one of the things that we've been talking with a lot of employers about is applying for some of these new government programs in a way to assist their employers who are dealing with reduced income. So while some employers have been able to maintain employees at full salary despite the reduced work, most can't. And that's just the reality. Consequently, the work sharing program has become one of the most popular benefit programs that Service Canada offers for employees. We've been assisting employers to access this program for years, but most people are only hearing about it now. Under the Workshare program, you don't have to lay off employees. You share the available work between employees who form part of a Workshare unit when there's a decrease in business activity. So unlike the new Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, so when there's a decrease in business activity, these Workshare units, they have to be employees who do substantively the same roles. So you can essentially replace one with the other. So you create these units, and those individuals agree, and they're in agreement to get submitted with your application to a reduced workload. And you can reduce them between 10 to 60%. So if that's somebody who works 5 days a week, they can go down to 4.5 days a week, or they can go down to as low as 2 days a week. And they get their salary from you for the days worked, as well as they get EI for the hours given up. So it's not a full top up of your EI, of your wages by EI, but it is an additional amount that you get from EI that you wouldn't normally get. And the hours worked don't grind down the EI that's available to the employee. So that's one of the ones that's become quite popular. The Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy has been announced, and then they announced some changes again to it yesterday. They announced that you can use that in conjunction of a work share. So where we find this really beneficial to employers is where you have a lot of individuals who are over that $58,700 threshold that's under the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. We can use Workshare to bring down the overall wages that would be paid by the employer and still get that wage subsidy. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, that's the one where employers who can show a 30% decrease in gross revenue on a year-to-year assessment. So you look at March 2020 compared to March 2019, April 2020 to April 2019, and then May 2020 to May 2019. If you could show, originally it was a 30% decrease in each of those months. Yesterday they reduced it to a 15% decrease in March, and then a 30% decrease in April and May. The Government of Canada will cover up to 75% of the wages that you pay to your employees, to a maximum of $847 per employee, or for the first $58,700 paid to that employee. So what that essentially means is if you qualify for all 3 months, the Government of Canada will give you $11,000 per employee to give them as wages. And this is essentially they're paying you back for having already paid those wages. The portal is not open for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy yet. It is has been announced that it will be open within 2 to 5 weeks, and they're working right now to make the application such that once you get approved, you'll have money within 2 days. They are advising all employers to go onto the CRA website and open up a My Business account if you haven't already done so, and get your direct deposit set up as well. So that's a really good program, because what it does is it allows employers to bring back employees who they had laid off because the funds just weren't there. And the whole policy purpose of this is so that employers, when they are ready to go back to being 100% full, they have got those employees ready to go. They don't have to retrain, they don't have to recruit and wait. There's no delay, that the economy can just get back up and running as soon as possible. So there is that wage subsidy available. The other option is the supplemental unemployment benefits, which we call the SUB. So the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy we call the CERB, and this one is the SUB, and there's a whole bunch of new fun acronyms that have come along with all of this. But the SUB is for when you have laid people off and there isn't the work for them. So those individuals have gone on the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, or they're under EI and they're receiving money from the government already. You can top them up using a SUB plan, and that SUB amount will not grind down the amount that they're eligible for on EI, and it won't make them ineligible for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. So the SUB, however, has to be a company policy that you've created, and you have to register it with Service Canada. And in doing so, you actually create a binding contract between your company and Service Canada. So to the extent you need assistance with creating that policy, we always recommend that you get legal to look at it before you create any type of binding contracts between your company and the government. But that is available as well. And these are all ways that you can support your employees through this period. You know, everybody is freaking out about income and about whether or not they have a job, and doing terminations right now. You know, there are some terminations that of course are going to be necessary, but if at all possible, if you're able to do temporary layoffs, that is a better way to go in a lot of circumstances. And a lot of the provinces across Canada have made modifications to their employment standards, specifically with regards to layoff and allowing extensions of layoffs. So normally when you hit a certain point, depending on the province, your layoff automatically becomes a termination. Well, a lot of them have gone back and reworked that so that you're not limited to such a short amount of time, because they don't see this as a 60-day issue. This will go on for a few months more than that, and before we can get things back up in the way it was, or at least as close to the way it was before as possible. I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you, Jenna. And from my perspective, I just wanted to mention that we are working with a number of construction organizations and clients, and the focus really seems to be around two areas. One is health and safety, which is first and foremost for many companies that are being forced or have no option other than to work double shift and 24/7 to make sure they maintain the contractual schedules. Most contracts don't incorporate force majeure clauses that would work in the contractor's favor, so that there are many companies out there that are struggling to get compensated for the impact that this crisis is having on the schedule and the cost increases in their projects. So we're helping these clients prepare claim documentation and additional compensation requests for their insurance companies under the construction all risk policy, which is typically the best avenue for recovery for those kinds of impacts. Our service support includes, schedule analysis, includes cost forecasting, estimate to complete forecasts, taking into account the new operational rules, the new health and safety constraints. The other area where clients are seeking help is many of the clients are looking at this proactively and taking advantage of the shutdown in the non-essential projects, particularly where labor may not be working and the whole project may be suspended for until further notice. The staff and the management on the projects are working on general support tasks, and it's a great opportunity to go back and revisit your project plans, your project execution plan, your cost budget, your schedule, your estimates for change orders, make sure that all the registers for letters and correspondence is in place, make sure that all your all your budgeting is done properly and can be communicated to the stakeholders, be it the VP or executive directors or the board of the company. Ensure that your training programs and things like health and safety records, toolbox talks, all those kinds of daily activities continue. Some of the clients, it's interesting to see that they're starting to do toolbox talks and site progress meetings, hosting those meetings virtually through Microsoft Teams as well. And then lastly, but not least, we see that the market is going to enter into what they're calling a construction tsunami at the end of the crisis. So a few months from now, hopefully activity will be back to normal, and then all these commitments at a political level and all these projects that have been part of the long-term planning for a while will need to resume, and will need to resume ever more quickly than they were progressing before. So those projects will be in need of the better talent, the people that can help restart and lead through what we anticipate to be a very, very busy time. And from that angle, I can tell you that we have not seen a slowdown in the tendering activity. A lot of the government agencies continue to issue bid documentation and tender packages to the market. And many companies have taken the opportunity to refine their proposals and deliver better responses and proposals that will ensure they win work going forward. So if the pipeline is slowing down, if the amount of revenues or backlog seems to be at risk, rest assured that is only temporary, and that there's a lot of work coming down the pipeline at the other end of this crisis. So our KPMG team is happy to help in any of those areas. If you feel shorthanded, or if you feel you would need a third-party opinion on any of those issues you're going through. Over to you.
Thank you, Augusto and Jenna. That was great. I hope everyone found those practical topics relevant. I'm just going to check in with Kenny. I realize we're approaching 5 minutes or so from being out. Is there anything in terms of questions that you've seen come in that we would want us to address before we move on?
Nothing specific as such questions, Jennifer, so we can move on. I'm just mindful of the time as well, so I'll leave it up to you. And to cover that, I think the mental health would be a good, interesting one to cover.
All right, I'm going to go here, and then I'm hoping we can touch real quick on collaboration tools. So mental health and maintaining connections, we have touched on a bit throughout, but we're going to just revisit this here again. And this is a area where we know that we're facing a lot in terms of this being a global problem. So it's not just about an Alberta problem or an Ontario problem or a Canada problem. There's so much to process in terms of what has really been the effects of the coronavirus globally. So it is times like this where we have to lean upon the people in our lives that we trust, and our family, our friends, and to have these conversations of trying to decipher what is going on and have that support. So we need to really think about debriefing with the people in our lives on what is happening, and scratching our heads as we work our way through this. But it's so important to do that, to share the concerns, to get the help and support from others, and to connect with people about concerns on a regular basis. I know I look forward to, I have a really great network of friends and family in Ontario and Nova Scotia, and I've had a lot of regular catch-ups with these people on weekends in particular, where you have like coffee or wine catch up. It's good. It's important just to also hear the point of view from different parts of the country even. Um, I'm going to touch back here on the managing of media. This is also where we're just encouraging you to really set time limits and occurrences of how much information you're ingesting on all of this, and to try and limit it to a couple of times a day, no more than that. It just can be too overwhelming, and you're getting lots of information if you're doing a couple of times a day check-in. Gathering the facts, it's important. If you're in connection with other individuals, obviously you're discussing what the news is, so it is good to make sure everyone's clear about what are the actual facts about what's going on, and to take the right precautions when we're given advice. And then back to this new routine. Well, it's a new routine at home. So it may be similar activities that we would conduct, and then we'd step outside our house, shut the door, and off we go. But it is important about maintaining, your mental health through whatever can help you get through that. So if it's physical exercise, that often can help. If it's doing something creative within your home, virtually, as in cooking. I just made a great recipe the other night, and I so enjoyed it. It's just kind of a release, and it's nice to cook for someone who enjoys it too. And just making sure you make time in your day for the things that you need to carve out aside from your work life and meetings, and to take those breaks. So hopefully these are some good tips and some reminders of what we talked about. If I can just quickly bring up one tool here. We've mentioned a few: Skype, Teams, and hopefully some of you are familiar or even using one or both. I've learned about a tool called Zelo, and Zello. I don't know if Augusto, you're familiar with it, but out here in the West, I was talking to a colleague who's been working with construction, and he mentioned this tool, and it's like a walkie-talkie tool, but it's for your mobile device. So it's a way for you to stay connected to the people if they're doing essential work, so people out in the field and people in the office, and it can be a really quick way to actually do a call out to people who are working off site. And there's a free, subscription to it. And it's not to say that we're promoting anything, but it's just something that you might find of interest if it could help you, where you're wanting to be part of those kind of on-site conversations from time to time. It's a way to stay connected. So I'm just going to pause there. Kenny, there's one more topic about cyber. If you want, I can quickly go through it, or we can just pause here.
I think you can actually go through it very quickly, Jennifer.
All right. All right, so cyber, really this is about making sure that, from a user point of view, if we get a link or a text or an email that looks weird, it probably is not something that we should be clicking on or responding to. It's about common sense, quite honestly, and when you receive something that might be prompting you, urging you to do something, that's usually a scam. And it is just to be wary of that, because in this environment that is absolutely on the rise, where people, these kinds of attackers have more time. They may have more people's time to try and distract with. So this is the time when we're most vulnerable. So just think twice. If you're being urged to pay a bank on another side of the world there's some transaction, they give you a link, probably best not to click that link, because if you've never heard of that bank or ever dealt with them, then it's likely a scam. And these are just some considerations regarding cyber. And, you know, we've touched on some of these, but with trusted Wi-Fi networks, so we're all at home and we're using our own Wi-Fi, that through our different telecommunication providers, you know, there's obviously going to be some protection there, but it's just always to be mindful. You might see that. I'm sure that there might be some new vulnerabilities, just not being on a protected organizational secure network. There could be some vulnerabilities here on your own personal home one. If you're in public, then yes, consider the risk of the actual device itself, and anything that work related. You'd want to make sure if you've got a work device, then hopefully it's already protected and encrypted, and you've got a secure IT network who's already managed that. And maybe I'll just touch on one more here with relation to the phishing attacks. Again, number 6, it's just, this is when we're most vulnerable right now, especially with the coronavirus. Unfortunately, you may see some scams that actually use the coronavirus to lure you into thinking that, you know, there's some legitimacy to it, but in most likelihood, it is not a valid, you know, ask of you, or just be on the lookout for that. If you've not really heard of where it's coming from, it's likely a scam. So all this information came from our cyber team. I'm working with a partner based out of Toronto from Risk Consulting, and he is wanting us to encourage all of these important points for you to be mindful of. And I just want to say thank you. This is really concluding us now in this webinar. We really hope that you have found this to be of use. There's some links in here that we've included to some publications that all relate to the content that's in here. And if there's anything that comes up of interest through this that you would want to see more information about, please let us know, and we can share more information with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. And so thanks, Jennifer, Augusto, and Jenna, for your valuable insights. I'm very mindful of the time. It's 5 minutes past 3, so we did not necessarily have much questions, of course, but I'm just going to wrap it up here. So thank you again for joining us for this webinar, our 4th webinar, and for KPMG for presenting this. Our 4th webinar on the series will be next Thursday, April 16th at 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, on managing the contractual and related legal protections and risks for construction companies, so which is quite a popular topic, and we hope you can join us. And thank you once again for joining us for this webinar, and for those celebrating, happy Passover and happy Easter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.